Let me introduce our guests. We have on Zoom meeting two of them. Javer, the director of this documentary. Carl, you see us, you hear us? I see you. Brand-Jacobsen. Kai, hello. Do you hear you? Okay. And Emilian Mihailov, can you please hear next to me? Just a second. So, Javer is the director, as I told you. Brand-Jacobsen is the president Romanian Peace Institute. He is one of the leading pioneers in the field of peace building, mediation, and peace process. And Emilian Mihailov, here next to me, he's the director of the Research Center in Applied Ethics. His research interests are neuroethics, bioethics, and moral psychology. First, can we start? Okay. Allow me first say a few words, if it's okay for you, Carl, Kay, about Breivik and a short presentation about what happened before this powerful documentary. And it's better for me, and I'm very sure that for you it will be great if I read all this short presentation. On 22nd July 2011, at 3:30, a man drove a car up the government area of Oslo, placing that car on the parking spots in front of the Prime Minister's office. At that time, Oslo had no special security rules, so this man put the car just outside of the building. In a few minutes, the facade of the building collapsed because of the bomb prepared by Breivik himself. The bomb had over 900 kilos. Luckily, the Prime Minister was at his residence working at the next day's speech for the Labour Party Youth Congress at the island of Utoya. On this first attack, 8 people died and police officers are sent in that area. Breivik was driving slowly out of Oslo to the Utoya island, where the Labour Party youth was having their summer camp. The access to the island was stopped because of the Oslo bombing, but he went on the island dressed as a police officer. At the ferry boat, he said that he must go to the island because he wanted to check if everything is okay, considering the attack in Oslo, and to check if there are any bombs on the island. He had a lot of big boxes with him and said that he signed his equipment for detecting bombs, but inside there were guns and 3,000 bullets. His goal was to execute 600 teenagers participants at that Congress. He later told journalist Esne Zairstad, he wrote a book, one of us, he's translated in Romania, unul dintre noi, I think at Polyrom. So he later told to Zairstad that at his arrival on the island, all his body said, "Don't do it, don't do it." He demanded a guard who was on the island to gather all the children in one room because he wanted to inform them about the attack in Oslo. But that guard, a former policeman, starts to put more questions, and Breivik, feeling insecure, shoots him. After this first kill, his body broke the barrier and became relaxed, accepting more easily the killing. This was the beginning. First death of 69. One man, 72 minutes, and 69 dead people. All this because, I have a quote from Breivik, all the Muslims must be killed, converted, or deported. Europe must be purified. End of the quote. The members of the Labour Party were, in his opinion, traitors, and they must be killed first. After this introduction, we can start the Q&A session with Carl, Javer, and if you have questions, we can start to talk about. If you have not, I start the questions. There is somebody in the audience? Not yet. Okay. Carl, I saw this documentary a few years ago in Haugesund Film Festival. I was very impressed. It was a rough cut, actually, then. I have watched all these years to exploitation distribution of this film, hoping that it will inspire the European documentary films. So we have on this production, on this film, a production process and a psychological one. Did you had a therapeutical intention at the beginning?
My intention with the film was all the way to make a film and not a therapeutic session. I understood that by putting together these survivors and the young Norwegians, it would, of course, have the possibility of a therapeutic meeting. And therefore I also had a psychologist close to the project that was present all the time we filmed also. It's hard to differ the two when you make documentaries, when you make any documentaries. But of course in this place it was important for me to have psychological security for the participants.
Was difficult to convince the victims to put their memories in the front of the camera? And how do you find that?
Yeah, I took quite a long time actually to put the participants together. Partly because I didn't want to rush it, and I didn't want to, how do you say, hunt for survivors. So I had a collaboration with the foundation. It's called the support group of the survivors in Oslo. So I had a presentation for them in Oslo, and then I could publish a letter on their closed Facebook group where I basically presented the project. I said, this is what I want to do, this is the reason why I want to do it, and if you're interested in telling your story this way with reconstructions, please contact me and I can inform you further. So then I got contacted by survivors, and for me it was important that they kind of took the first step towards me. So I knew that they had kind of the drive to want to tell their story. So that was kind of the first step, the first gate. And then I went out and met everybody who answered me. And out of that, I made a selection, which is based on if I felt they were ready enough to tell the story. Because I knew it would be a tough process. And I wanted them to have had enough therapeutic work with themselves, so they were ready to go into this, but at the same time have the drive to tell it and also the sincerity and will to do it. And then I wanted a mix of genders and stories.
Questions? We have one. Please help us, Irina.
Hello, my name is Ilinka, and my question was about, also to the filmmakers, about the children that came, well, the teenagers that came to help reenact this. So if there was a scouting process there as well, or there was a will already from the youth, the generations after Utoya, to try and connect to what happened there?
Thank you for your question. It was I had helped to find the teenagers because I wanted teenagers who had some acting experience. They had been like a pre-acting school, because I wanted them to know how you step into a role, but more importantly, how you step out of a role. So you don't take somebody at the place and then leave them there. They had to have some experience of that. But then I was very kind of, it was important for me that they are not there to do an acting job. They were there to support, help, understand. So the kind of the social impulse in them was what I was looking for. So that was the most important for me. And I would say that among these kids, they had a great longing to understand Utoya, because they were like 10 years when it happened. So they really wanted to understand and were eager to understand. And I think also to help and support. So for me, in the filming process, they became more and more important as a bridge between the survivors and the audience. So in a way, they are the ones we can kind of relate to more closely. And of course, this bond that happens when a survivor chooses somebody and asks them, "Can you play me? Can you be me?" And when the teenager asks, "Okay, who was I then?" So for me, it's a magical contract they make there, and it was, for me, it was important at the place, and it's important in the film, also as a psychological space for the survivors to be able to do this. Because if they would play themselves, I don't think it would be possible, and I don't think it would have been healthy also.
We have another question there, Irina.
Greetings, my name is Adrian. Was there a time during the filming process when one of the survivors was emotionally overwhelmed by the whole situation and said, "Yeah, I don't think I can do this anymore. I think I might quit this project"? Was there any moment of such?
There was this moment with Jenny that is also in the film, when she's kind of hesitant to step into the room and to perform the reconstruction. It's part of the film where she kind of cries in the sofa. Of course, that was a possibility also in the film. A documentary film is a process. I mean, you film the process, and it could have happened. It didn't happen, but for me, I think it was very kind of healthy moment, because she really, then I knew she wouldn't kind of run over herself. She was really thinking about it and measuring it, if she could do it or not do it. And she did it, and she was very happy afterwards. And she also felt strengthened that she went through the process. And Jenny was the girl, she said after the film, she said, "I'm surprised now I have a happy memory related to Utoya after the filming process," which was, for me, it was very kind of revealing. Yeah.
Questions? Somebody else? Oh, please.
So the documentary is about the victim's perspective. My question is, what kind of debate would you hope to generate in public debates? How would you like this documentary be used in our political conversation more generally in society?
For me, when I started the project, in Swedish media, it was an overwhelmingly amount of focus on the perpetrator, on the terrorist. Media was very fixated by him, and he was kind of also dictating what Utoya was. So that is kind of one of the stepping stones into this project, that I wanted to kind of turn the story from the terrorist and from the perpetrator's point of view into the survivor's point of view, that the survivors kind of carries the story. So that was one of the important things when I started the project, and I still think it's important. And I think it's important, as with the Holocaust, it's important that the survivors are the ones who carry the story and not the perpetrators.
Thank you. Okay, you're here. You hear us?
Yes,
Hi,
I hear you well.
Please, can you tell me if July 22nd is an European 9/11? Could be.
I wouldn't see it as such, but it depends upon how you mean it. It has parallels with 9/11 in terms of it was a moment in which we were confronted with a profound act of hate. But I think the difference with 9/11 is 9/11 came in the context of a response to decades of US military violence and terrorism against civilians and populations in other parts of the world. So 9/11 came within a very political, strategic, military conflict which had gone on for many years, in which it was an attack carried out by people in response to US strategies and practices over years. Now, in Breivik's mindset, he was in part also carrying out an attack in response. So in his mindset, he was responding to policies and practices within Norwegian society and to some extent within Western Europe more broadly that he rejected. And we can speak more about that. But I think they're very different. I think where they're particularly different, and this is something that's very important to look at also, especially in the world we live in now as we're seeing what's happening in Afghanistan, was in the response. And this is why I very much appreciate what Carl said, because part of the fundamental response in Norway was an almost immediate decision that we were not going to allow Breivik to define or dictate our society. His act was one of atrocious violence. It cannot be, as some government policy afterwards tried to look at it, just treated as if it was a lone, isolated incident. It was an act of violence which unfortunately is far too present and continually present in our world today, which is something I think we should discuss. But broadly within Norwegian society, I think in some ways, and I even have pictures of this, if it could be okay to show people one moment, maybe even just to take a very quick second right now. In Norwegian society, in some ways, the 25th of July is just as important as the 21st of July. So the 25th of July is what you see here. This is what happened just days after Breivik's attack.
You told me that you are in Oslo when it happens, and very
Yes,
close to the first blast.
I know exactly where I am actually in this picture. And I just want to show you the last one here. But the 25th was when hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people came out all across Norway. I think at least 1 in every 4 citizens in the Norwegian population actively took part and was out in their villages, their towns, their communities, not in the brutal act of violence that we know from the 21st, but in an act of standing together. And that's why, in the same way that, for example, we know through the work of Carl and this film, you know names you wouldn't have known otherwise. So many people around the world know Breivik's name, but now we learned Rakel Mortensdatter or Jenny Andersen, Torja Hansen, Mohammed Saleh. And there's also people like Astrid Høm or Bjørn Magnus Iller, who have dedicated their lives after. They would not call themselves victims. They would call themselves survivors of Utøya. But what they do now is work to help us to understand better what drives, where does this hatred, where do these acts of violence, where does this terrorism come from, but also what can we do as citizens, as human beings, as art makers, filmmakers, to go beyond or to build something better, and also to address and challenge this deep
Okay,
issues
thank
that
you.
we face in the world today.
Later we will talk about this driving extremism, of course. So, Emilian, how was it possible that one single person killed 77 people? What happened in his brain?
Thank you. So I'm a philosopher, and I try to look at this phenomenon called morality. And when you try to understand morality, you have to look at the dark side of morality. So one question that fascinates me is, what happens in our mind or in our brain for you to be able to kill many people? So in order to get an approximate answer, you have to look at the brains of psychopaths. So I saw there's an interesting interview on YouTube with a psychopath who has killed and raped several women. And he's asked, why did you do that? He says very calmly, as you saw in the documentary, that Breivik walked calmly, he looked over his shoulder, he talked calmly. And this psychopath answers, well, women and cars are all the same. So the assumption was that for him, women were not persons, were objects, just like cars. So part of the answer is that in order to kill someone, you need to strip him of his person status. He's not a person anymore. He's just an object. But with Breivik, he's a special kind of serial killer. He was politically motivated. He was morally motivated. He stripped the personhood of the others based on the idea that the others were enemies, were a threat to him. So in this case, what for me the biggest idea that we need to take home is that sometimes morality can inspire us to kill others. Sometimes morality is about love, is about connecting with others, but in conflictual situations, morality justifies to kill others. So you see this idea that you're not randomly killing people. And I think this is the case with Breivik. He was in a much broader political, social context that was marked by many social issues, like immigration, like multiculturalism. And he used these stories to make up a whole new enemy that needed to be eradicated. So for people to kill other people, you need first, these are like, you have to take them with approximation. You need a broken brain. Psychopaths, it is known that psychopaths have dysfunctional brain in processing emotions. They don't feel guilt at all. They don't feel the suffering of others. This in part explains why Breivik was so calm and did not react. Remember in the documentary, I think it was the little boy in the end who said, I wanted to look so much younger in order to impress him not to be killed. Psychopaths are not impressed by that. And they don't feel guilt. So this is part of the explanation. And the other part is that he needed a story to get revenge. He needed a story about how the others are a threat. He needed a story that dehumanizes the others. And the implication is, in our public debates, is that we need to be responsible with what kind of stories we tell about the others. We need to be very careful not to portray anyone with whom we disagree as being an enemy. So I think for me, the broader implication is that politicians and public intellectuals have a big responsibility not to make bold, radicalized statements about how the others are the enemy, and should not steer up polarization. I think in the end, and this is what I liked very much from the documentary, being focused on the victims, not only understanding their suffering, but there's a very interesting nuance in their perspective, in that how they managed to get by with that big suffering, at the same time living their lives with compassion and love.
And empathy.
And still not being brought in a circle of hate, because most often the expectation is that when you get really hurt, is that you respond with revenge, you respond with hatred, and this is how you build up a circle of hatred. And for me, what I take from this documentary, the perspective of the victims, not only that I understand their suffering, but it's something uplifting in that how they managed to see more than their suffering, to see that you can still hug each other, we can still connect beyond provocations of hatred.
Carl, do you hear us?
Yes.
Okay. Can you tell me, you have a screen, I suppose, with this documentary in front of the survivors, yes or not? It was screened, the documentary?
If I screened it with them, or?
And how it was?
It was, I mean, first, we put a lot of effort also in what happened after the filming, because there is a tendency among documentary filmmakers that you film and you have close contact with the people you film, and then in a way you cut the bond. For me, it was extremely important in this case, particularly, to keep the contact. So after the screening, we had this WhatsApp group during the filming, and when we left the filming scene, everybody kept on WhatsApping. So they in this group chats, they kept on telling, now I'm on my way home, now I'm home, this is my mother. We all kind of got connected back into the ordinary life after the filming. And then we had a meeting 2 months later where we met a weekend and made food together and just hung out without the camera. And then we had kind of continuous meetings, and we had a big premiere in Bergen in Norway. So and I still have contact with them all. So it's and I think it's in this case it's important. And I say it's important in this case because what happened at Utøya was that there was a cut in the reality. There was the terrorist. He tried to break the connection. And so for me, it's been very important to keep the connection. And of course, they saw early edits and when it was finished also. So they've seen everything, of course. And sometimes it doesn't work out between the filmmaker and participants when they see it, but this time it has worked really good. They like the film and they like what they did. And I think most of them say that what they got from the filmmaking is as important as the ready film. And now they all have been out screening it in schools in Norway, all of them, all the survivors. And often we screen the survivor and the teenager who play the survivor. So they often go together to schools and speak about what happened. And last thing is that Mohammed, he has been a lot in schools. He has showed it a lot in schools. And for him, that part has been really important. For him to be able to speak about this to other kids, tell his story, so he said to me that was kind of that has been something surprising but very important for him.
Feel free to put question if you want, please, because we can talk and talk and talk. And please, Irina.
That documentary, it's, at least for me, very difficult. And I wonder to how many people does this documentary reach? How many spectators has this documentary? It has two, at least one, if not two competitors, fiction movies, more or less fiction, on the same year, that is in 2018. Some of them I've seen on different TVs. This one is or not with the same public or comparable public, or how much?
I know that this documentary started, I think, after 3 years. After 3 years, after Utoya, 3 years later, and the features I can in 5 years. Carl, can you help me?
There was in 2018 there came 3 films. It was Erik, a Norwegian filmmaker, who made a one shoot taking film with no edits, no cuts, following a survivor on the island. It's a fiction movie. And then came Greengrass film. That's on Netflix. It's a 3-series fiction film, kind of a Hollywood version of what happened. And then it's this documentary. And of course, I would easily say that this is the least viewed film of them 3, because one is on Netflix, the other one went very good in Norway. So it is like that with documentaries. I think it's a tough subject. People are hesitant, I would say, to kind of, they are scared and think it will be too horrible for them. I think this documentary is tough, but I think it's also uplifting. But I really would like to honor you who's seen it today. And it has been screened in several festivals. It has been on 20+ festivals. It had premiere in Berlinale, and it's been all over the world. So there is an interest to see it. And for me, film is working primarily with what is beyond the words, what you cannot say in words. And I think film is specifically good to work with really tough subjects, because there is something about this happening that is very hard to explain and hard to express in words. And I think with film you can reach something else beyond the words, and you can also take in something that you cannot put in words. So for me, it's been important to make a film about this subject.
Another question? We have another one there, Ivana.
Reaction of other survivors after seeing the movie. Have you gotten any feedback from any other such survivors? Was it positive, uplifting? Was it negative of some sorts?
We had, before the film premiered in Norway, we had several screenings, like 20 screenings, specifically to survivors and relative of survivors, or relative of victims. And I think Norway has been really good in this case, that they had really good care, and they had kind of, there was a crisis number you could call, they were kind of, and really good invitation. So we went around and screened the film before it premiered in the cinema, primarily because when the films of 22nd of July came out in Norway, people were of course scared, and they had fantasies of what it would be. So it was important to kind of get people to see it and know what it was. And it was, for me, it was very intense screenings, because there were parents who lost kids, that saw it. And I remember conversations. I had a conversation with one mother who lost her daughter. She said to me, when Muhammad was by the cliffs, when I saw the movie, I wanted him to go further away on the beach and tell what happened to my daughter. So there is need from parents who lost kids to know more what happened. So that is one aspect. And I had another, there was one survivor who came up to me and said, I want my own reconstruction. So I think that there is...
do you do something for this?
It was good reactions, but also very tough feeling in the cinema, of course.
Thank you. Questions? No. Okay, we can come back to you. Kai Brand-Jacobsen, do you hear us? Oh, we have another question. Sorry, Kai. No, please.
So, considering that, right, a year after the movie was first released, another similar event happened, but on the other side of the world in New Zealand, an event inspired by Breivik. What was your reaction, and what was the reaction of the Swedish society of the Christchurch mosque bombing? How did it feel to you, considering all the events that happened back in 2011?
Yeah, I remember it well. I was editing another movie, and the editor, she was from Christchurch, and we had a lot of discussions about it. And of course, it kind of brought up the memories of 2nd of July. And as you say, because it was so specifically related to, because he was like clearly inspired by Breivik. And I think it's after 22nd of July, I thought that this is kind of now the right wing have gone too far. That was my feeling. I really thought that the fascist right wing have gone too far now, and there will be a decline of the right wing because the societies will be on them. But I was wrong, and instead it's been the opposite. These last 10 years, I would say the extreme right has grown stronger in the world, and the Christchurch is, of course, one expression of that.
Please, Jonna.
I have a short question about your motivation in doing this movie. Did you do this movie for the survivors and the victims, or for the public? What was your view, your motivation, your point of view?
Yeah, I mean, of course, there's a combination. You do a movie because you are interested in a subject, and in this case, it's a politically motivated event. And that was, of course, for me, one of the motivations to make the film. Then of course, I want to make it for the public, of course. I want to bring forth the story and create some impact. But when you do a documentary, you also do it for the ones you make the film with. It becomes interwoven in a way.
Somebody else? I have two more questions for Kai Brand. Kai?
Yes, please, Claudia.
Okay. What is driving extremism? Why is growing?
I think there are many factors that are driving it, and this makes the connection well with what was mentioned a moment ago in terms of both the Utøya attack and the Christchurch attack. What we're seeing, as Carl mentioned, is in the last decade a dramatic rise in right-wing fascist, white supremacist, and neo-Nazi movements, particularly across North America and Europe. But you have equivalents that are developing in many parts of the world. And there are a range of factors. I was very saddened by the psychological profile that was done, because it was, as sometimes happens, quite a general philosophical one, instead of in any way actually addressing and speaking specifically to Breivik, which might have been useful. But Breivik, some of the things that are important to know about him, he had an extremely traumatized childhood. His mother was very unbalanced. His father had nothing to do with his life whatsoever. He had a psychological assessment done when he was quite young, which said that he lacks spontaneity, imagination, ability to empathize, has no language to express emotions, finds it difficult to express himself emotionally, but when a reaction eventually comes, it is a remarkably powerful one. And the reason why I'm saying this is because in Norway, almost every year we used to have the Oslo Forum, which would bring together practitioners from all over the world dealing with armed violence. And one of the things that they identified is one of the most important ways of addressing armed violence is not more police on the streets. It's not more lengthier prison sentences. It is healthy childhoods and the necessity to provide healthy childhood. So here is an individual who, when we speak about pathology towards violence, he had a deeply troubled childhood and he did not receive further mental support. There were many indicators along the way. That's one thing. Second, he was not groomed. This isn't like Al-Qaeda or ISIS, where they had an active organization that was able to reach out and to cultivate and to groom him. Instead, like Tarrant in Christchurch, what he was able to do as someone who had difficulty relating with others, was disassociated from his society and those around him, he was able to go online. And online, he found a overwhelming ecosystem, a universe, which gave meaning, which gave narrative that made sense for him. And it was a universe of hate and of extremism. And this has grown exponentially since 2011. So we've led a major project which is mapping the rise of the right within Europe over the last 10 years. And for example, if you look in countries like Romania, Poland, Hungary, the amount of fake news, the amount of hate messaging that people are being exposed to, and like your guest who's with you there on stage spoke to, when you have a fundamental worldview which divides between good versus evil, right, wrong, everything is dualist, everything is manichaeistic, leading to Armageddon, this final struggle of good versus evil. And then here's the challenge, because that narrative is overwhelmingly what children here get in school, what they get in churches, what they get in political science and international relations courses. That narrative is the narrative of Western political leaders in the global wars of terrorism over the last 20 years. So part of what's happening with the rise of the right is over the last 20 years, civilizationally, we've witnessed and to a great extent accepted a normalization of violence and extremism. And the narratives of the far right, you spoke of how when you dehumanize and you commoditize people, that someone can carry out sexual violence because they consider a woman to be a commodity. The dehumanization of others is not only something that you see within extremist movements, but one of the things we're looking at now is the way, for example, if I go into universities here and I do discourse analysis of the speeches of a lot of the professors, or if I look in the media at the war reporting and the hate messaging in the media, or if I look at the statements of political parties and politicians, like in Romania, we flag AUR, the far right party, but you can also look at the liberals and many others if you want to see just rampant homophobia. So the problem is, when we think of what is enabling the rise of the right, it's not only about looking at the most extreme manifestations, the Tarrants and the Breiviks. It's about understanding the enabling context and the worldview which gives rise to it. So a war culture-based approach to conflict, the normalization of these continual wars, the demonization of others, And we also need to look within our textbooks, within our sacred texts, within the way our journalists report on these issues in media, because the more it is normalized, the more it becomes normal to have incidents of violence. And today, it is the rise of Christian and right-wing violence, which is actually the most extreme in Europe and many parts of the world.
Thank you, Kai. You answered already to my second question too. So, another curiosities, questions?
Can I say one thing?
Yeah. So nobody.
Claudia, Carl wanted to say something.
Please, Kai.
Can I add one thing? Yeah, I just want to add to Kai's beautiful statement here. Very interesting. It's also, since I'm a filmmaker, it also concerns films. Because if we look at how films are narrated and what story and what worldview they present, specifically the movies that is for the teenagers, it's stories where the heroes are often acting exactly the same as the perpetrator. The hero comes in and leaves dead bodies behind them, but it's the hero. So we have this kind of narrative going on in our society, which is, of course, problematic. And also the gaming industry, because Breivik was also a hardcore first shoot gamer. So, which is for me, it's very interesting also to understand him.
Claudia, could I speak to that for just a moment, if possible?
Yes, please, Kai.
Okay, because I know that the festival is so beautifully called Eroi, heroes.
Yes.
And then you have in the image on the background there, I believe that's meant to be a picture of Breivik in a uniform driving up, or one form of hero or another. Sorry, maybe that's not it. I was just associating. So it looks like it's small on the screen. But what do we celebrate as heroes? I've worked and traveled in 126 countries in the world, including many of the worst war-affected countries: Afghanistan, Iraq, Darfur, Somalia, many others. Or areas where I feel even more at risk, like New York and across the US as well. But in any of those areas, and here in Romania, or in Sweden, Norway, the United States, if I go into parliament, and I've done this, or if I go into schools, and I've done this, and I ask children to give me the names of 10 wars that have happened throughout history, anyone who is about 12 years old and up can do that extremely easily. Some very quickly, some they have to think a few moments. If I ask them to give me the names of 10 military leaders throughout history, anyone can do that. All you have to do in much of Western Europe is just look at the public monuments in most central squares, but people come up with it quickly. But if I ask them to give me the names of 10 nonviolent leaders, if I ask them to give me the names of 10 successful nonviolent movements, you could not in all of Romania find enough people to fill the room that you're in now who could answer such a simple and obvious question. And part of the challenge is what we are celebrating. We have a project we've been working with youth all across Europe called Do One Brave Thing. And the idea is to understand the importance of our own bravery in the face of hatred, intolerance, and violence. Because usually we learn that bravery is what Marines do, or bravery is going into war. I've been in war zones since I was 17 years old, and it takes a limited and certain type of bravery, but any coward can pick up a gun and kill. I think the bravery of a social worker or a teacher in Romania under very difficult conditions, who goes in every day but still continues to try and do something better for children. The bravery, what we need is the bravery of everyday citizens who, for example, imagine you're on a bus and you see one person come up to another and they begin to aggress them. Maybe it's a man aggressing a woman. Maybe it's someone who's exposing hate because of the other person's identity or ethnicity or gender beliefs. It could be anything that makes them think that I have a right to hate that person. Now, in a lot of work on radicalization in Europe and internationally, we try to look at how did that person reach that point? What's the psychology of the person doing that? We look at the person that is being hated. How is it affecting them? And I would also suggest we need to look at everyone else on the bus, which is also all of us, either here online or in your showing there today. What do we do when we see that happening? Do we sit back because we feel afraid, uncertain, shy? We're scared maybe they'll turn their hatred towards us? Do we sit back because maybe many of us even agree with some of those ideas? But here's the thing. Children in school and most of us in society, we don't learn bravery anymore. We don't learn how do you stand up in that moment, not just to be a bystander, but to take your responsibility. And that's part of what we need to find ways of doing together. And I'm so deeply appreciative. Some of the audience mentioned it was also profoundly challenging and powerful for me to watch this film. And I appreciate all you've done, Carl, and all of those who were involved in bringing this forward. And I think perhaps there is a need for us to create, just like you're doing now in Rozhnov, spaces of discussion where we talk about what is the society we want to live in? What do we want that to look like? And what can we all do with our different gifts, our passions, our skills and capabilities to help to make that happen? And tragically, actually, that's what the young people on Utøya had come together to do that July. And they have not stopped because of what Breivik did. Many of those who survived Breivik continue to be actively involved and shape their community, our country, and our world. And youth in Norway continue to come together and to ask these questions and get involved to be the change they want to see in the world.
Great, thank you. So, questions? The end is coming, please. Okay, this event is part of the Connecting Cinema project, a European initiative to create a network of small cinemas. Amza Pellea, we are here, is proud to be part of this network together with the Neue Kammerspiele from Germany, Fortress of Culture Šibenik from Croatia, and Star Cinema Veria from Greece. We have here from Germany and Croatia our partners, yeah? Hello. Thank you. So I want to thank you to Javer and congratulations again for this powerful documentary. Thank you so much, Brand-Jacobsen. Thank you, Emilian, Mihailov, because you are here next to me. Thank you so much, Daniel and Aline, for all these cables, screeners, and everything. They made possible to have an online presentation. So thank you so much for you because you stay here with us. See you to the concert, I guess, which is in the school yard, no? Okay.